It's really over. Hey everyone, welcome to the horror show. I'm Cecil Laird, and that's right. This book, which has launched, a almost Star Wars-like fandom in a matter of about 10 years, I think, overall. 16 years when you consider the beginning of this. This long-running book, The Walking Dead, has officially ended with this issue, number 193. So what I'm going to do here is do a bit of a review. I've just finished it. Just came out yesterday as I'm recording this. Happy 4th of July, everyone, by the way. This is a monster, and I will go through it, actually, and let you know what happened. But look at this. Look at how big this book is. That's like a graphic novel in and of itself. I think it's probably 80 pages, I'm guessing. It feels like 80 pages. But, yeah, so what you guys need to know first off is that there are going to be massive spoilers in this video. So, obviously, this is the last issue of the series, so there may be spoilers for the TV show. There are definitely going to be spoilers for the comic book, because I'm actually going to have to, in order for you guys to get the full impact of this, I have to briefly touch on this, which is basically issue 167 through 192. I'm not going to take long going through this. I'm just going to give you the overalls so you know why everything in this one is impactful. Because, yes, this book took some major detours. Well, I should say the TV show took some major detours from what the book did. One of those things being Andrea, the sniper character in the early seasons, dies pretty early on. But one of the things you need to know is that in the comics, not only does Rick not end up with Michonne, but he ended up with Andrea. And this issue here kind of started towards the what they built to in this one in the end. So again, major spoilers, just so you guys know. I don't know what they will put in the TV show from the comic. One can never guess, but here we go. So in this issue, Andrea unfortunately passes away. She is bit, and this entire issue is basically a goodbye, and it's, Rick's love after many issues, because it happened well past Lori. It's after the time jump and everything. So, yeah, it's definitely a sad issue. And then the series continues on, and one of the other key issues, I'm just going to talk about the key issues, was this one here, number 171. That introduced this character, who is Princess, who is basically just a weird, wild character that is actually a good person, so she's fun to watch, but she's completely crazy, but in a fun way. So that's a really good character that pops up. And then there is a very key issue here with Negan. This is issue 174, and this is the last time that Negan appears in the series until the very end. And this was a really good issue because, if I'm not mistaken, this is the one where we finally get resolution, because, let me make sure I'm right. Yes. So just so you guys know, this issue is amazing because it's the issue where Maggie finally confronts Negan for killing Glenn way back in issue 100. So that's the last time we saw Negan. So that is another key issue. So moving on from there, then we get into, right after that, we get into what leads to this last issue, because we get introduced to this. This is a storyline called New World Order, and this is basically introducing this place called the Commonwealth, which is a new community run by this person who calls herself the Governor. Doesn't have a great history in the Walking Dead universe, but it ends up being a very well-run community with its own security force led by this gentleman. And there you see Princess is in there. And so Rick is introduced to this community, and he very much likes what he sees, except for the fact that they still adhere to like the class system. So that's the only thing that he kind of doesn't like about it, because some people, just because of their status in the previous world, I believe, that's what determined their status within the community now. It's a very well-run community, and people seem to be happy, except under the surface, they're not as happy because of the class system that they have in place. So that's what begins the next run, which is Rick's group and the Commonwealth getting to know each other and learning to trust each other or not. It also turns out that in this storyline, Michonne discovers that her daughter is still alive and has been living in the Commonwealth for all these years. So Michonne actually decides to stay in the Commonwealth, and not only that, but we find out that Michonne was actually a lawyer before the whole trials, which you'll understand in a bit, began, which is the zombie apocalypse. So she is taking up, the Commonwealth offers her a very nice place and a very nice job as the town's lawyer because they need one. And so that's, again, the class system being determined by what you did in the previous time. But nonetheless, Michonne is happy to do it because she gets to spend time with her daughter. So there are basically tensions that build because people, even within the Commonwealth, start seeing what Rick and his group have accomplished without a class system. So they start to want Rick to take over again. But the difference is, in this time, Rick decides that he doesn't want to take everything by force like he did with, I believe, Alexandria, which he ended up having to do. Well, I don't know. I can't remember which community he ended up having to take by force. Probably more than one. But nonetheless, he doesn't want to take this one by force because he sees the results of what they've gotten done. So he ends up protecting the governor when you know, the rabble rousers decide to try and kill her in order to replace her with him. He defends her, and Michonne and him have a little bit of a divide, but it doesn't last very long. That was used for cover purposes. But things start getting coming to a head within the Commonwealth community, and there ends up being a riot and a whole, you know, thing that happens where the governor ends up being displaced anyway. The people speak and they want her gone, but and the thing that ends everything is the last 3 issues here, which is 190 through 192. And what happens is the governor lady has a child, a kid who is, you know, in his late teens, I think, maybe early 20s, but late teens, I believe. And he doesn't like the fact that his mom is being ousted from power. So he takes things into his own hands. And after Rick gives another fantastic speech, after the whole riot is ended, and he explains why the communities all need to come together, and basically he unites everyone. But unfortunately, the kid has his way. This is Carl right here, because at the end of this issue, the governor's kid shoots Rick in the chest. And then you think, oh, well, they'll probably be able to save him. Maybe it missed vital organs. But no, in the beginning of this issue, I'll show you guys real quick. But this is issue 192. And at the very beginning of the issue, not only is Rick shot in the chest, but the kid takes it up another level and keeps shooting him. So that is how Rick dies in the comic book, if you guys are curious. So he gets shot, and he just, this is, I mean, it's such a dramatic Shakespearean end to Rick, because he literally just gets shot dead by a character that he just met a few issues ago, who is angry for ridiculous reasons, and he just sits there, and his body just lay there as the sun come up. And then, unfortunately, when Carl goes to visit him, this was a dramatic moment. Carl goes to visit him, and unfortunately, he sees his father as a zombie, and so Carl has to be the one to take him out. So that's how that happens. I don't know. You can get second printings of this. You can't get first printings of it anymore unless you pay a top dollar on eBay. But this is how things happen. And then the governor lady accepts responsibility for what happened and realizes that her kid has to... They want the kid to die, but she just asks that they don't kill him. So Carl says that it'd be better if he stays in prison for the rest of his life for what he did. So that's what ends up happening. He gets put in jail for the rest of his life. So yeah, that's how this issue basically ends, except there's a massive, massive funeral procession where the entire community wants to go and pay their last respects to Rick. And it's this really cool splash page by Charlie Adlard, the artist on the series for a very, 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 very long time. I think since issue like 7. So yeah, that's how issue 192 ends. And so here's how this whole situation played out. Nobody knew that the Walking Dead comic series was going to end, you guys. Nobody knew. So much so that Kirkman even had them solicit 3 issues that were never actually going to come out, right? And I'll show you, because they actually put the artwork for those issues at the end of this. So what happened was, yesterday, I think very late on July 2nd, he put out a note saying, oh, by the way, this is the last issue of The Walking Dead, so make sure you go get yours. And I didn't even find out about it until after my comic book store was open on Wednesday yesterday. And I read the article. I was like, holy crap, I got to go get mine. So I went. Luckily, I was a subscription person, so I had mine waiting for me. But they were gone on the shelf, and the comic book store said that they had sold out in the first 30 minutes. And that because they didn't tell anyone that it was the final issue, in order to keep the value up, no comic book store had the chance to order an extra amount. So they had their standard Walking Dead orders in, and that's what they got. No extra orders, because they pumped out that it was going to be the last issue. It's just the people that have been following it, that wanted to get it every week, they're the ones that got rewarded, and they got a copy. They will be putting second printings out probably very rapidly. I'm sorry about that, guys. Whenever I do comic reviews, it's the comic book reflecting thing that throws off the lighting, so I apologize about that. But anyway, in fact, I'll take it out of here so it doesn't do it as much. But yeah, so, oh no, it's just because I'm crossing a weird threshold with my lighting. I gotta fix that. Anyway, guys, so this issue, it just dropped, and here's how it goes. So this is Walking Dead 193. I'm not gonna go through the entire thing page by page, but I'm gonna tell you the gist of what happens through it. So the first thing we see is that there's a zombie walking up a hill. So, but immediately his head is cut off with a sword, very familiar sword. And it turns out it's actually Carl. But Carl looks remarkably different, if you can tell. He is very well grown up. He is actually older than Rick was when this series started. And what you also see is this here is another difference from the TV show. So you guys remember the end of season 2? The big reveal at the end when the last person wandering out of the barn, the last zombie wandering out of the barn was little Sophia? Sophia didn't die in the comic books. Sophia and Carl continued to be raised together through the entire comic book series, and here we are at the end, and Carl and Sophia are married with a daughter by the name of Andrea that they named after their father's second love. So this is an awesome setup already, and you can tell it's a genuine leap forward in time. So it turns out that the world is still, there's still zombies, it's still a mess in places, but they have established safe zones throughout the country now. So largely it is no longer a concern. And so this one zombie was an anomaly. In fact, he even checks the teeth and sees that it hasn't really been eating anything. But it turns out that what's gone on is this right here is a little wagon that says The Walking Dead, see The Walking Dead, because they've all but been eliminated in the safe zones. But who's running this little exhibit? But if you look closely, you can kind of see that he looks a little bit like Glenn, because he is Herschel. That is Glenn and Maggie's son that is actually running this little venture. He is basically running this thing where he wants people to remember what the world was like before and remember that this danger is always around the corner. Carl has a big disagreement. He thinks that the presence of those things, no matter what, is a danger to everyone, including and especially his daughter. So he took it into his own hands to kill the zombie, but since it's Herschel's private property in this day and age now, they've gone far enough where it's considered his property, like his house or anything else. So Carl gets in trouble, and the sheriff comes and talks to him. This character is also from the series, but I don't remember his name very well. The thing is, I've been reading it every month, and so things start to fade from month to month when you're not reading it in trade paperback style. But they basically say that Carl may have to stand trial, and we get them visiting a couple of other people that we know. But there's a really cool point. There's a couple of really cool moments here. And one of them is when they're walking here and they're just enjoying the amount of stars in the sky. They never really take the time to stop and smell the roses in this series before, but considering how few city lights there are now, because it's essentially the Old West again at this point in the book, just the amount of stars you'd be able to see would just be incalculable. There's a couple of really cool moments like that in this book, and I'll get to them in turn. But yeah, so they end up going to trial, and Carl is so the resolution is, in order to just make right what happened, Carl needs to replace the roamer that he killed from Herschel with another one. And so that's the resolution he's handed down. He is not a big fan of it, but also what ends up happening is this person shows up who is President Maggie. So Maggie has ascended to president of the safe zone, I guess you could call it. So she is ascended, and she comes in and basically says that so she's the one that confers with the judge, and she's the one that and so the judge then hands down the verdict of just replacing the roamer. So Carl ends up not being okay with it, and he unfortunately decides to take things into his own hands, and he goes into the wagon and slaughters the rest of Herschel's zombies. But because one of his jobs is to take supplies to various parts of the community throughout the safe zone, he gathers his supplies and takes off before anyone can really capture him for it. So he ends up leaving with all the supplies, and on his way out, he meets up with this young lady. Now, for those of you that don't know, this is Lydia. So Lydia, from the comic book, I don't know that I haven't watched the most recent season of The Walking Dead, which handled the Whisperer War. So in the comic, Alpha, the female leader of the Whisperers, has a daughter named Lydia. And in the comic, Lydia and Carl end up striking a friendship. And after the Whisperers War, in spite of how dangerous Lydia is perceived to be because she was a Whisperer at one point, they let her stay in the community. And Carl is the one that basically normalizes her. And they get together, and she ends up being the one that in the comic series convinces him to not have to wear his eye patch anymore. She's like, this is you. You don't need to hide who you are. It even gets a little weird where she like licks it at times because they're boyfriend and girlfriend, and so that's Lydia's his first girlfriend, his first, that whole thing. So it's really cool to see that she's not only still around, but at one point in those earlier issues, when things were getting particularly dangerous, Carl actually hands the hat that his dad gave him way earlier in the series, and he gives it to Lydia. And here, all these years later, sorry, it's so awkward with the mic right there, Lydia is still wearing that hat. So this is still Rick Grimes' original sheriff's hat from the very beginning of the series, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, either that or he found another one along the way, but I believe that's the same first one. So anyway, she decides to accompany him as he delivers all of the supplies. And one of the places they stop is a place where there's supposedly a myth, and it's just this house that no one answers the door of, but you can see there's a gravestone that says Lucille on it, which is the name not only of Negan's bat, but the bat was named after his dead wife. If you guys didn't know that, that was also revealed in a special behind, like it was a backup story in Image Plus for like 8 issues. So you can get that as a separate trade, but that's Negan's story. So they go from community to community, and you find out that Jesus is still alive, and Jesus and Aaron are actually together because Aaron's boyfriend dies at some point in the earlier issues. So now Jesus and Aaron are together. It's super cute. And now here's this other moment that I wanted to tell you about, because at one point Lydia and Carl are delivering supplies, and they see this, which is thousands of birds. And Carl mentions about there was a time, he's like, I read about this once, how when settlers first came to this country, they could hunt by blindly firing their guns into the air when a flock passed overhead because the bird population was so dense. We brought the population down. I guess there's not enough of us left to do that anymore. So it's just this moment where there's all these birds, because since there's so few humans, there's no one killing them off, and they're just flourishing and stuff like that. So it was an interesting little moment. I don't know that it would work like that, because are we that big of predators of birds? I mean, I don't know. But, anyway, it was still a nice moment. And then we also see that enough of society has been reestablished that there is a railroad system with people legitimately waiting for it, and they ride it as far as it goes west, and that's when they meet up with another familiar face, who is, oh, look at this, this is such a cool splash. So it's literally, it's the Old West again, where they're building the railroad, and it's just a really cool image to see that The Walking Dead came this far. And of course, who's behind the building of the railroad? None other than old Eugene. Eugene has made it through the series, and in spite of his cowardice, he has stepped up every step of the way, and now his goal is to finish his side of the railroad because he is in contact with another group on the other side of the country that is also building a railroad, and the idea is, he says, within a year they should be able to meet up and the East should be able to get to the West and vice versa for the first time since what he calls the trials. That's what he refers to it as, and it's cool because you find out that the zombie apocalypse all that time in the rest of the book was called the trials because everyone was tested. And I was like, oh, that's really clever. Kirkman, good writing, right on. So anyway, moving on, we see that there's still some heat between Carl and Laura, this character who is, I believe, from the trash group of people, like, you know, that actually made it. No, the trash people are new to the show. I can't remember where she came from. Oh, she was part of the Saviors, I think, because she was in love with Dwight, and during the Commonwealth storyline, Dwight wanted to kill the governor and, you know, depose her and put in Rick instead. So he was literally about to, and Rick stopped him the only way he could, which was by shooting Dwight in the head. So Rick kills Dwight. It really upsets Laura, and all these years later, Laura still holds a grudge. But, you know, Carl yells at her and says, you know, we're all here because of Rick. You need to respect that. And so, yeah, they continue on. And they decide that, or they finish their round taking the supplies to all the different communities, and he knows he has to go home and face the music for killing the zombies that Herschel owned. So he gets back, and there's this nice little thing where his daughter Andrea is running out, and Sophia is angry because she knows that he needs to face the music. And basically, the cops show up and tell him that he's being taken to the high court. Everything has gotten past where it was before, and he needs to see Judge Hawthorne. So we're like, oh no, and I don't know what that means, Judge Hawthorne. And it turns out, of course, Judge Hawthorne is Michonne. Because, as I said, she was put in as the lawyer of the Commonwealth, and all these years later, she's now worked her way up to the High Court, which is basically the highest thing in the safe zone, where if whatever she says, there's no jury, there's no anything else, whatever she says goes. And so she is the one that has to decide what happens with Carl. So Carl gives an impassioned, very Rick-like speech as to why he killed the roamers, and he said it's not, and he also has a moment earlier actually with Lydia where she says, she actually, you know, criticizes him for wearing an eye patch, and he yells at her. He's like, I wear it because I don't want my daughter to know that there was a world like that. I did it, you know. She's like, you were proud of it before. And he's like, I did it before because everyone looked and they saw death. You look and you saw death. I don't want my daughter to see that. So that's why he wears the eye patch now. And so he talks about that, he gives this impassioned speech. He kills the walkers not only because if they break out, they're a danger to everyone, but also because his daughter is now 6 years old and she's never seen a walker. So he wants that kind of world for the future. He says, that's what my father fought for. So he gives this impassioned speech, and it's really, really cool. And then Michonne follows it up with a speech of her own, featuring the words that Rick has said, that Rick said long ago, and it's just an amazing speech. I'm going to leave it for you guys to read on your own. Definitely go get a second print copy when it comes out, because even those I'm sure will be worth money, but it's worth it for the story alone. So it's funny, she basically gives this whole reasoning and says that, no, I agree with Carl, we need to leave that in the past. And so she rules that no zombies are allowed in the safe zone at all, and that she sets Carl free. And so when they go into her chambers, and she's like, you didn't really think I was going to throw one of my favorite people in jail. And she even says, she's like, also, you used my sword. And so it's a really funny little exchange. And it's just a nice little thing. But then Herschel, there's a really good exchange here, too, because Herschel confronts Carl and explains why he's so upset that the zombies were killed. He said, you don't understand. No one remembers my father. No one writes books about my father. He was just as much a hero as yours, but no one talks about him. So when I kept those zombies, I kept them to keep people afraid, because it keeps me afraid too. I was afraid of him too. And when I felt afraid, I felt like I was feeling the same thing my father felt. So it was how I felt close to him. And I was like, ooh, dang, that's heavy. And so Carl isn't as, pleased with himself as he might have been. But we also see that there's youth with skateboards, and two of them are kind of heckling Carl without really knowing him. But one of the kids scolds the other two and is like, you don't even know who he is, what he and his father have sacrificed. You guys just get out of here. And he's like, I'm sorry, Mr. Grimes, and walks on. And Sophia has this clever line. She's like, add another generation, they won't even know who we are anymore. So it's commentary. But then we also see that there is a massive, beautiful statue of Rick right in the middle of the Commonwealth to remind everyone. And it's really nice. And then so we get back to the house, and we see everything's fine. Carl is with Sophia, and Andrea just wants him to read her a story before bed. And so this is where we get to the wrap-up, which is Carl sitting on a rocking chair reading a story. And as he's reading the story, we get flashes of things that are happening. So the story is basically the story of Rick Grimes. And it's told in a very beautiful and eloquent way. And we just see things happening, like we see the president and what she's got going on. We see here's Jesus and Aaron just on their river, just waving to a riverboat. We do see that Negan, the myth, is actually still around and leaving flowers for his dead wife. We see that Princess actually got together with the security guard in the Commonwealth. That's adorable. And then I can't really remember who they are, but we also see that a couple of other things of note. We see that the governor still visits her son, who is still in prison for killing Rick, so that's good. And then we see that Michonne's daughter has gotten married and had a kid, so Michonne even has a grandchild. That's adorable. And then, of course, we see that Rick Grimes has been buried next to Andrea Grimes. Oh, we also see here that the railroads have finally met with Eugene overseeing it. So he's accomplished his goal as well. So that is basically how it wraps up. And I'm going to get a little choked up here because I got choked up when reading it. Because I've been reading this from the very beginning. I got the first issue off the stands when it started 16 years ago. So, all right. So, damn it. So Carl basically says that, that story was about your grandfather. And, it's important that you know that. And she says, I know, Dad, I know. And he gets a little sad and a little hurt that she kind of disregards it. But then she says, read it again. And we finally get a happy ending where Carl gets to continue reading about the adventures of his father with his daughter. And it's just beautiful. It was a really, really beautiful ending, guys. It was awesome. I was a little worried because I started it last night and I was pretty tired. And so I got up this morning and I finished it. And I'm really glad that I waited to read it in the morning because it landed a lot heavier. And then there's a long essay at the back by Robert Kirkman explaining why and how he ended up doing it this way. He basically explains, and there's a little bit of extra information I'll go into here. He explains that he ended the series this way because he said this series has always been about surprises. You never knew who was going to die or how or when. And so he thought that in a series like that, to let everyone know when the end was coming, it was antithetical. And then he's like, I don't like it when you know things are going to end because then you get a feeling that the book is ending as it's approaching that. And, it doesn't do its service. And he's like, I wanted to just finish with a bang, let it, and just hit it that way. He's like, actually, this book was supposed to end a long time ago. He said it was supposed to end around issue 77 when Rick gets to Alexandria and takes it over. And he basically says, no, we can't keep moving. We can't be roamers. We have to stick it out here. And so he does. And then he says that it ended on a close up of Rick's face delivering this speech, and then it cut to a statue of Rick that you cut out, you pull out, and you see that it's cracked and it's overgrown, so you can see it's been there for a long time. And then as we pull out further, you just see another zombie walking by. So the idea of that original ending was that Rick succeeded, he started society over again, so much so that they built a statue to him, and then society fell again and the walkers still took over. So he's like, that ending, he's like, I came up with obviously years ago, that was too bleak. And so about 4 years ago, he came up with this new ending, and he realized that rather trying to expand it all the way to 300 issues by creating filler, he said the series was telling him it needed to end, and so he ended it. And this is how he did it in a massive, epic fashion, and I absolutely loved it. And then they throw in for a treat the solicitation of the 3 fake issues, because they had solicited 192, 193, 194, and 195, so that people that got previews didn't realize, hey, where's Walking Dead this month? You know, what's going on? They would have been tipped off. So here are they said that as a joke, they kind of they made it seem like those covers were going to telegraph Carl's death. So here are the first 2 covers. So Carl looking very much like Rick, and then although maybe that's not meant to be Carl, maybe that's meant to be. Oh yeah, that was meant to look like Rick. Okay. But he should have had only one eye if it was meant to be Carl. Anyway, this was also him getting stabbed by Michonne's sword. And then this was the death of Carl with Sophia and Andrea. So that is, that's The Walking Dead, number 193, you guys. It was epic. This whole series was amazing. It had a lull or two in the middle of it, and you know, it's funny because at the end of 192, when they killed Rick, and in fact, I picked up the second printing of it because it had a cool memorial cover for Rick. At the end of this, in the letters column, Kirkman even said, you know, I've said from the beginning that this series can go well past Rick, so stay tuned. There's more coming. And then he drops 193 and is like, no, that was just Rick's story. So yeah, it's an interesting way to do it, but Walking Dead number 193, that was a fantastic journey. Thank you, Mr. Kirkman. I actually got to meet him at a Mesa convention center here after season 1, when he actually had Shane, Glenn, and I think Maggie. Or no, not Maggie, because Maggie wasn't around after season 1. I can't remember who the other person was at this point, but they were all here with Kirkman, and man, what a ride. 16 years. Wow. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked it, click the like button and subscribe if you want to see more good stuff coming forward. I think we'll probably be reviewing Stranger Things Season 3 in the near future, but I hope you guys are enjoying it. I know a lot of you out there are binging it right now, so thanks for squeezing this video in. Thank you guys very much. Until next time, I've been Cecil Laird, and remember, stay scared.